They thought the deal was in their pocket the second I walked out of the room. What they didn't know was the technology went with me, and the signature that mattered, it would never be theirs. The morning I stepped into that steel and glass boardroom in downtown Chicago, I wasn't nervous, I was prepared. My name is Natalie Quinn. I'm 47 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been building a predictive analytics engine designed to detect financial anomalies across 10 economic sectors in under 8 seconds. It didn't just measure risk, it forecasted impact. And today, Westbridge Equity, one of the largest institutional investors in the Midwest, was here to see it in action. They sat across from me, polished and poised in custom suits. Beside me stood Darren, our COO, and a few of his hand-picked loyalists. They stayed quiet. Fine by me. This wasn't their spotlight. I plugged in my laptop and greeted the room. Good morning. What you'll see today isn't just a risk model. It's a map to the most predictable paths forward. The demo lasted precisely 15 minutes. I walked them through live simulations, including a predictive scan on last quarter's earnings data. The system beat industry expectations by 34%. Silence followed. Then Westbridge's senior partner, Jonathan Blake, leaned forward. That he said was the first pitch today worth our time. Behind me, Darren forced a laugh. Glad we could deliver. But Jonathan wasn't looking at him. He was looking at me. Who led the architecture? I did, I replied. Keep her in the loop. We'll move ahead. It wasn't subtle. It was direct. They weren't investing in the company. They were investing in me. I left the room proud, not just because I'd landed the biggest pitch of my career, but because for once, I wasn't invisible. That pride didn't last. The next morning, the office was electric, clinking glasses, loud celebration. Darren had ordered champagne and cupcakes for the whole floor. A banner stretched across the atrium, 900 men, secured a new era begins. I stood in the back hallway, half in shadow. My name wasn't anywhere. No one turned to thank me. No one even met my eyes. Yesterday, I was the one commanding the room running real-time simulations for the largest investor in the Midwest. Today, I was an afterthought, a ghost in a celebration I made possible. I checked my calendar. No strategy recap, no investor debrief, just an empty schedule and an office buzzing with congratulations that never made it to me. Darren stood in the middle of it all. Champagne flute in hand, giving a speech that echoed off the glass walls. This is the outcome of bold leadership, he said. A vision of dedication and of trusting the right people at the top. Applause broke out. Someone handed him a plaque with gold foil lettering. I stood quietly near the break room, sipping lukewarm coffee. Invisible. That's when Caleb approached. He was new, fresh from a grad program in Ann Arbor. Eager. Not yet trained in office politics. He glanced around before leaning in. This might sound odd. But weren't you the one who built the predictive engine? I blinked. Yeah? I was. He frowned. I was reading the system documentation they sent to our team. Your name isn't in the architecture file. It just says, core system finalized by executive leadership. I figured it was a mistake. It wasn't, I said, forcing a smile. It's just how things are done around here. Caleb hesitated. You should have been recognized. Darren didn't even mention you. I shrugged. But something inside me shifted. This wasn't an oversight. It was precision. My fingerprints had been scrubbed off a machine I built from nothing. Refined into a marketing line Darren could wear like a custom suit. I returned to my desk. A small box waited for me. Inside, a branded notebook and a chrome pen engraved with the company logo. No note, no acknowledgement. Just a corporate thank you that said you were convenient until you weren't. The party raged on. But around me, the air had turned brittle. The same floor where I'd helped shape the future now whispered something colder. Erasure. I didn't yet know if I would vanish quietly or leave something behind that would haunt them forever. At 3:02 a.m., a soft ping woke me. A single subject line. Compensation adjustment. Effective immediately. Still half asleep, I expected the usual, maybe a budget forecast or some routine company-wide update. But instead, one cold paragraph stared back at me. Clinical, stripped of emotion. Due to strategic realignment of departmental resources, your base salary will be adjusted by 42% effective this pay cycle. No meeting, no discussion, no signature. Just a generic HR email and a boilerplate disclaimer at the bottom. I sat upright in bed, blinking through the early morning haze. I reread the message once, then twice, then again. Each time it hit harder. 42%. They had cut nearly half of my income less than 48 hours after I helped secure the largest investment in the company's history. No mention of the architecture I built. No recognition of my contribution. Just a quiet strike, delivered under the cover of night, like they were hoping I wouldn't notice in time to push back. When I arrived at the office that morning, my badge didn't work on the second floor. The engineering wing, my home for 3 years, was now off limits. Caleb had to escort me up. He didn't say much, just kept looking at his tablet. "They moved your desk," he mumbled. They had. My new workspace was shoved into a forgotten corner near the emergency exit. No windows, no monitors, nowhere near the team I used to lead. The project folders I used daily were locked. The simulation environment I had built line by line, now marked restricted. I logged in. Access denied. Technically, I still worked there. I was still under contract. But they had taken everything that mattered and left me with a hollow job title taped to an empty chair. An hour later, Darren strolled past. He paused briefly, just long enough to meet my eyes. "Get the email," he asked, voice smooth, full of smug satisfaction. I didn't answer. He leaned in slightly. "You should have seen it coming, Natalie. You were getting too comfortable, too visible." I stepped forward, jaw clenched. Visible. I built the very system they're celebrating. And he knew it. He just didn't think I'd fight back. Visible. I repeated, my voice tight. "I built the very thing you're parading around." Darren leaned in close, his voice dropping just enough to slide beneath the noise. "You built it under our roof. You were paid. Know your place." I didn't reply. Not then. But in that moment, something deep inside me fractured, not like glass. Not loudly. It cracked like ice under stress. Silent. Sharp. Slow. They thought I'd accept this quietly. They had no idea what I still held in reserve. The next morning, everything felt off. Not just the silence, but the air itself. As if the building knew. No smiles. No morning chatter near the espresso machine. Even the people I had once mentored pretended not to see me. They looked right past me, rushing off to fake urgency. My desk, or whatever it was, sat wedged between a rattling file cabinet and a buzzing light. The chair creaked like it resented me. Or maybe I was just imagining that part. The worst part wasn't the space. It was the feeling. I was now a ghost haunting a company I helped build. Slack was silent. No team emails, no invite to the weekly sync. My calendar, blank. My job title existed, but my presence was now inconvenient. Hours ticked by. I pretended to work clicking through read-only files. Every click ended with 2 words, access denied. Around 11, Caleb drifted close. His hands gripped a folder. His eyes flicked around like he was crossing enemy lines. After a few awkward starts, he stepped beside me. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Sorry. I didn't know if I should." I looked up. "It's all right. What is it?" He handed me the folder, nervous. "I've been asked to prep this for the investor transition next week, but I don't get half the architecture." He hesitated. "I was hoping you could help explain a few things." Before I could respond, Darren's voice sliced through the room like a blade. "If you felt every word and want to see where Natalie's journey goes next, hit and Caleb. My office. Now." Caleb froze. His face went pale. He mouthed, "I'm sorry," and walked away. The folder stayed behind, trembling ever so slightly in my hands. Darren's voice cut across the room. "Caleb, my office. Now." It wasn't loud, but the sharp edge in it silenced everything. Caleb froze mid-step. He didn't say a word, just glanced back at me with a look that said everything. "I'm sorry." He disappeared down the hallway. 5 minutes later, the file reappeared on my desk. No explanation, folded shut, no follow-up, no questions, no answers. I opened it out of habit, flipping through pages like muscle memory, until I stopped. The architecture section, the system blueprint, the technical spec. My name was gone. No credit line, no mention, not even a footnote. No built by Natalie Quinn. Just blank, as if I'd never existed. A strange stillness settled in my chest. Not a surge of anger, but something colder, heavier. This wasn't just about being sidelined. They were erasing me. Erased by the same people who once begged me to stay late, patch last-minute errors, and clean up other people's messes. Now, they wore my work like a custom-tailored crown. I stared at the paper motionless. My hands didn't move. Neither did the fury. Because for the first time since it all began, I didn't feel angry. I felt nothing. The silence almost won, almost convinced me I had no power left, until I remembered I wrote the rules. Long before they even understood the game. That night, I walked into my apartment exhausted. The place that once felt like a haven now echoed like a cave. I let my bag fall to the floor, kicked off my heels, and dropped onto the couch without even turning the lights on. Staring into the shadows, a quiet question stirred. Do they even have the right to take this from me? I stood up, crossed the room, pulled a dusty black file box from the back of the closet. Inside the original design drafts, all notarized, dated before I ever joined the company. Next to them, a sealed envelope labeled in my handwriting, "Before employment, just in case." My hands trembled as I reached for it and pulled out the licensing agreement I'd forgotten I still owned. Clause 6.3.4. In the event of demonstrable unethical treatment or reassignment in conflict with the original terms of contribution, the licensee forfeits all rights to the intellectual property described herein. I stared at those words. I hadn't read them in years. I'd built the system alone, designed the algorithms in my apartment, tested them on borrowed servers, refined them with sleepless discipline. And when I joined the company, I licensed the model conditionally. They were allowed to use it, not own it. And now, they'd broken every condition in that clause. I sat still, stunned, then leaned back slowly, a breath filling my chest like I hadn't breathed all week. This wasn't the end, not by a long shot. Then came the twist, quiet and perfectly timed. A message pinged my personal inbox. Not my work email. This one came from Jonathan Blake at westbridgeequity.com. Subject line, no subject. Body, Natalie, quick question. Hypothetically, if your architecture were run independently, completely separate from existing infrastructure, would it still perform at full capacity? Just curious. Jay? I stared at the screen pulse, rising. Westbridge was watching. They weren't investing in the company. They were investing in what I built. And clearly, they were starting to understand who actually built it. They knew the truth. And now, so did I. No more waiting for fairness. No more playing polite. That night, I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed 3 words, "Take it back." I wasn't seeking revenge. I was restoring what was mine. By Friday evening, I wasn't angry anymore. Just exhausted. Everyone else had gone home. I sat alone at my desk, the hum of the HVAC echoing through the quiet. Every passing day, I felt myself becoming less visible, less human, more of a shadow walking halls I once filled with value. I opened my laptop, not to work, but to let go. One folder at a time, I began deleting my footprints, personal logs, early tests, draft iterations. Every simulation, every experiment, every late-night prototype I had once protected with pride. All of it vanishing like smoke, not in defeat, but in preparation. Deleted, one file after another. Then I hovered over a folder labeled N. Quinn Archive. My fingers froze above the trackpad, trembling. This wasn't just digital clutter. This was the proof. My fingerprints, my code, my ideas, everything they now paraded around as their own. But holding onto it felt like clinging to a hope that had long since expired. I opened a blank document, preparing to walk away. Effective immediately, I resigned from my position, and I stopped mid-sentence. Buried under scattered sticky notes and an old badge, I spotted something wedged near the back corner of my desk drawer, a flash drive. Plain, unlabeled. I didn't remember putting it there. Curiosity won out. I plugged it in. One file blinked into view: dad, last, talk.move. I stared at it for a long moment. Then, hit play. The screen flickered. The footage was grainy, recorded in the garage of our old house in Evanston 6 years ago. My father sat beside my first prototype setup, the very place where the early framework of my model was born. If you're watching this, Nat, something must have gone sideways. His voice cracked through the speakers. People will steal credit, push you aside. That's the price of being exceptional in rooms that aren't ready for you. But don't let them bury your brilliance. He paused, then added quieter. If they won't say your name, don't walk out quiet. Walk out loud. Make them regret every chance they missed to stand behind you. I paused the video. My eyes burned. The resignation letter now looked small, weak, like surrendering something sacred. Then my email pinged. No subject, no sender name. One attachment from Caleb. Don't tell anyone I sent this, but I figured you should see it. I opened the PDF, a confidential restructure plan, red and green boxes forming a map of the company's future. At the top, Darren's initials. In the margins, scribbled in ink, remove NQ, roll into ops, Q3, no attribution, not a move, not a promotion, an erasure. My jaw clenched, my hands curled into fists. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me forgotten. Darren hadn't just silenced me, he was trying to erase the fact I ever had a voice at all. But now I had two things I didn't have the day before: proof that they never intended to value me, and a reason not to leave quietly. I closed the resignation letter, opened a new file, typed a single word, bold, all caps, build. The moment I hit delete on that resignation draft, something shifted. I wasn't leaving as a discarded employee. I was walking out as the architect of what came next. Saturday morning, 6:30 a.m. I brewed fresh coffee and pulled my old ThinkPad from the back of the closet, the one that never touched the corporate network. I powered it up, entered my encryption key, and unlocked everything they thought they owned. Every original version of the model, every early design schematic, every line of code signed with my digital fingerprint. By 9:00 a.m., I was drafting the legal termination letter. Clause 6.3.4 activated. By noon, it was notarized. By 4:00, it was delivered by courier to the company's legal team. No headlines, no noise, just a clean cut. They didn't know it yet, but the foundation of their $900 million future had just collapsed. That night, I made one more call to a boutique law firm in Boston specializing in intellectual property protection and separation. Their lead attorney had worked with Westbridge Equity before. He didn't ask many questions. He just said, "We'll handle it." By Monday, Quinn Analytics LLC was officially registered. Headquarters, a quiet, co-working suite 2 blocks from my apartment in River North. The mission: reclaim, rebuild, relaunch. By Wednesday, I was sitting alone in that office, surrounded by quiet confidence and glowing code, watching the real version of my model come back to life, cleaner, faster, untouched by Darren's fingerprints. The one they had was clunky and watered down. This one, it moved like intuition, like lightning through dry grass. It was smarter, sharper, and this time, without question, it was mine. I hadn't told anyone. Not yet. The fewer people who knew, the easier it was to keep the boundary clear, their world versus mine. But someone found me anyway. It was Thursday afternoon. I heard a soft knock on the glass-paneled door of the shared co-working hallway. I looked up, and there stood Caleb, hands in his pockets, fidgeting. He didn't step inside right away, just stood there like he wasn't sure whether he was crossing a line that used to be invisible, but now felt permanent. I opened the door. He stepped in slowly, eyes scanning the small setup. One desk, one chair, one screen glowing with lines of code like a pulse. "So this is real?" he asked, voice low. "It's very real," I said. "And it's only the beginning." He nodded, taking it in, then leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "If you need someone who doesn't care about politics, just truth, I'm in. I've already picked my side." I blinked. Caleb, the same kid who barely dared speak to me 2 weeks ago, was now standing on scorched earth, willing to help rebuild it. I didn't smile. I didn't hug him. I simply pulled out a second chair. "Hope you're good with weekends," I said. And just like that, Quinn Analytics wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. Meanwhile, across town, the conference room at my old company was far too quiet for celebration. Yet the walls were lined with catered trays, branded binders and pens engraved with logos no one would use. Darren stood at the head of the table, flanked by 2 of his loyal executives, all of them dressed in identical slate blue suits, polished, coordinated, empty. His voice filled the air with a hollow confidence as he clicked through a deck of investor slides selling a dream built on a product he never understood. I sat near the back of the room. No nameplate, no voice, just a guest badge clipped to my blazer, the kind they hand to interns and contractors. Caleb sat beside me, scanning the room. We had rehearsed this moment all night. We'd run through the variables all night. Every possible angle, every if-then scenario. Like a chess match against a CEO who thought the game was already over. And finally, Darren said, his voice full of glossy certainty, as he clicked to the last slide, "You'll find our deployment roadmap here. Full integration projected by Q4. Model performance is already exceeding benchmark standards." At the far end of the table, Jonathan Blake, managing partner at Westbridge Equity, leaned back in his chair. He didn't speak, just tapped his pen once, then stopped. Silence. Then came his voice. Calm. Precise. "Thank you, Darren. Before we move forward, there's one final confirmation we'll need." Darren smiled easily. "Of course, legal compliance, IP indemnity, standard diligence." Jonathan shook his head once. "No? Intellectual property clearance." Darren hesitated. "We'll need written confirmation." Jonathan continued from the model's original architect that this system is authorized for commercial deployment under your company's name. The pause that followed was brief but enough. Darren blinked, then recovered. "Our technology is fully internal. No external ownership or licensing concerns." "That's not what I asked." Jonathan said, sharper now. "We need direct acknowledgement from Natalie Quinn." Every eye turned toward me. Darren let out a nervous chuckle. "Ms. Quinn is here as a courtesy. She's not part of the signature process." Jonathan didn't flinch. "She is now. Westbridge doesn't write $900 million checks without verifying who actually owns the code." My fingers rested on the sealed envelope in my lap. It was already signed, already notarized. A single line changed everything. The model is no longer licensed for use by Ellison Technologies under any form. I looked Darren in the eye for the first time. He looked uncertain, not furious, not smug. Just unsure. I didn't say a word. I slid the envelope across the table. Jonathan picked it up, scanned the top line, looked up at me. "You're the only person in this room who's told us the truth." Darren opened his mouth. Nothing came out. And that silence, that was the sound of power shifting, of a curtain tearing, of a company built on stolen code finally cracking open. The floor vanished beneath them, and I hadn't even said a word. It took only 12 words to tip the entire room into freefall. 12 words from Darren. Loud, cold, laced with arrogance. "We don't need you, Natalie. The system runs just fine without you." There was a pause. Not long, but just enough for the tension to settle, for pens to stop scratching, for the intern in the corner to gasp quietly. I didn't react. Not immediately. I just looked at him. Darren, the same man who once called me the future of Ellison Technologies. And now, here he was, dismissing me in front of Westbridge Equity like I was dead weight. It wasn't a slip. He said it intentionally, to humiliate me, to rip away credit with the kind of public flair he believed made him powerful. I stood slowly, no tremble in my hands, no hesitation in my voice, just the calm that comes when the fire inside has already settled into steel. I'm glad you said that, Darren, I said, stepping forward, because now no one will wonder whether this was a misunderstanding. He smirked. If this is about credit, Natalie, we've moved past. It's not about credit, I interrupted. It's about ownership. I opened my briefcase and removed a single sheet of paper, weighty, official, notarized. I placed it on the table in front of Jonathan Blake and the other Westbridge partners. I'm invoking Clause 6.3.4 of the IP licensing agreement. As of 4 days ago, this company lost all rights to use, distribute, or commercialize my model or any derivative of it. Jonathan reached for the paper, unfolding it with deliberate calm. He read silently, then looked at Darren. Is this true? Darren fumbled. She can't do that. The model is embedded. It's part of our core infrastructure. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. But is it licensed? Silence. Darren froze. Jonathan turned back to me. Is the architecture still functional? Still yours? I nodded. And improved, faster, secure. He didn't hesitate. Then we'll proceed as discussed. Darren blinked. As discussed with who? Jonathan stood. With Quinn Analytics. Gasps rippled through the room. Darren's mouth fell open. His face flushed crimson. He turned to his legal team, his executives, anyone who might somehow rewind the moment. No one moved. You're making a mistake, he said, voice cracking under pressure. Jonathan Blake didn't blink. No, we're correcting one. Beside me, Caleb leaned in and whispered, they have no idea how far behind they are now. I nodded slow and steady because Darren had just watched $900 million walk out the door. And I hadn't even raised my voice. The press release went live at 8:02 the next morning. Westbridge Equity invests 900 mayors in Quinn Analytics redefining predictive intelligence. My name was in the headline, not in the fine print, not buried in paragraph 3. Front and center, exactly where it belonged. The news spread like wildfire. TechWire, Chicago Tribune, the Wall Street Journal. Within the hour, my inbox flooded with messages. Some stunned, some apologetic. A handful from former co-workers at Ellison Technologies. A few asked quietly if Quinn Analytics was hiring. We were. Our new office wasn't massive. Not yet. But it had high ceilings, clean whiteboards, and wide windows that let the sun in. It had something Ellison never gave me: air. Autonomy. Respect. Caleb sat across from me, studying our roadmap for the next phase. His new title, Chief Technology Officer. He earned it not through years of ladder climbing or politics, but by standing with me when it counted. When the room was still dark, he said, once you lit the match. Now he smiled, tracing timelines on the screen. This feels weird. Good weird, I asked. Yeah? Like we're building something real. I nodded. We are. And this time, we're doing it right. That morning, Quinn Analytics opened its doors with a team of 12. Every one of them had left Ellison Technologies on their own terms. Some quietly, others with fire in their footsteps. But all of them came with one thing: belief. Not just in me, but in the future we were about to build together. They weren't just developers or analysts anymore. They were believers, people who had seen firsthand what happens when power is hoarded and credit is stolen. Now, they were building something better. That afternoon, a new email arrived in my inbox. No subject line, no greeting, just a few clipped sentences. If I'd sent this sooner, maybe things would have ended differently. But I guess it's too late now, isn't it? D. I stared at the message for a few seconds, then closed the tab without replying. He was right. It was far too late. By the end of the month, Ellison Technologies was under federal audit for intellectual property fraud. Nearly 40% of their operations were shut down or absorbed by competing firms. Darren resigned voluntarily pending investigation. Publicly, they called it internal restructuring. Privately, they knew the truth. They'd backed the wrong person, and they'd lost everything. As for us, Westbridge funded a multi-year innovation roadmap featuring real-time risk modeling, humanitarian crisis forecasting, and even climate-based financial mitigation tools. What began as a market risk engine had evolved into something far greater. It wasn't just about revenue anymore. It was about impact. We weren't chasing revenge. We were building something that would outlast all of it. A legacy. And let me say this, especially for anyone out there feeling overlooked, erased, or underestimated. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to burn things down to rise. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is to build something so unshakably real. They can't ignore you anymore. If you've ever been sidelined, silenced, pushed aside, don't just remember my name, remember your own. Because the world has a way of circling back to those who stood tall, even when it felt impossible. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt like Caleb or like me, then do this. Subscribe. Leave a comment. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because not all stories end in collapse. Some stories, they begin again with quiet power. And this was only the beginning.